I'm soaring, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov, and our current struggle with you will be stopped by the fact that with those who have lived in Ukraine. And today's draw, and at night. May on the was attacks of the Russian Federation on the Ukrainian energy sector again freeze Ukraine. Again, there are serious problems for the survival of the civilian population. We can say that we have already encountered such attacks from 2020 to another in 2023 lessons. About those Ukrainians who lived and blackouts, texts were written. Reports in sprats of materials about the accounts happened to become frequent on history. I'll mark it myself. I told the rosary about the blackout in Lviv. In Psha, for a long hour of trips to the place, I had dawned on the sky over it, because there was no greedy light over Lviv. And not often in the place, having dawned on the sky like that, I immediately guessed at once that there was no real electrician in the place of it. And so she has her palami, which means that she and functionally cotton wool business and fishing. And it seemed that Russians had few exhibitions. I haven't allegedly sensed the exhaustion of blackouts in Ukraine yet. I'm not yak of their exhibitions, no one is we're not in the hall. You're still handing over Putin, a filthy student at the history school. You are now going to try out the old schemes, in order to avoid dieting for a sonorous recipe, for a sonorous scenario. Sprats from the fact that we are lying in wait for Russian-Ukrainian wines at a time, it has already been demonstrated in various wines and so-called special operations of both the Radinsky Union and Russia. It is important that we are in favor of Putin's trimmed appearance, so often his political chopping is so frequent. Nama extrapolates Navinu and the practices of the Radian Special Services. We understand perfectly well that, in principle, Putin Prague bombard. There's a sprat of bucket strength. Obviously, we can still lead strikes on infrastructure in Ukraine to serious problems for the latest functional confrontation in the corners of the Russian and Ukrainian. And that such blows to the Ukrainian economy, the Ukrainian whiskey fishing complex. The shutters are serious problems for cutting through the montages to the front, and there are still frequent blows. I am on tilky blows to the energy sector, and intense blows to the slime infrastructure, and I am richly more intense. And I am richly successful below the blows in Ukrainian to climb. And obviously, in the form of cotton wool from the center, but for the view of Europe. So that with such a rank he and the temple montages, and the entire Ukrainian economy are aware of spending away. Because we, of course, do not lick the montages, then with such a rank there is no real possibility for the functional economy to be far away. And the task of Russia. And our task. But the most important task, supposedly perfectly of course, is the sunsets of people. Then Putin is quite under the sofa for the capitulation of Ukraine. And without knowing the extent of the surrender, he was really extracted to the fact that the notification that his army could not bury the wrong territory. It's like I'm under control, so that the Ukrainian power stops functioning at Maybut. So I'm something like that, right? I still can't get the army into the pores, and I've already taken 3.5 Rocky. And it is not known that it is sung for Russian-Ukrainian guilt, but for the beauty of the power. On such a I am for with the finding of an economical sample. So it is necessary to get and for. But that's why I became president with Donald Trump, who got up in the state, the idea that it was possible to push Ukraine through Trump. Get him the idea so that on Russian minds, and so that Trump, having looked at Ukraine, these mental capitulations are accepted on the Ukrainian one. So I hear in Russia, it is possible to eliminate the rebellious power from my Putney. What could not, although intense diplomatic for the lessons of Trump, is his administration, as we know and happened. And that was assigned by the special representative of the President of Russia on economical limes and with Western Ukraine. And Kirill Dmitry, as in the stats view of Steve V. Hoff, and Unravel and President Trump about the brilliant economic prospects with beer, with received in the state in the Russian Federation at times I still Trump will be pressed on. And take out of the Ukrainian president's surrender. And I'm going to tell you again from Putin's point of view, not fighting Ukraine, but because he himself is adored in Russia. Their powerful Hromadians will be a slave to the icon, in this will of his and you want to look like that, the whole martyr will forgive. And he can't even think that the Ukrainian president is on the Lord of Ukrainian. So I'm on an important frequent post, Radytsky simply. We know that not so richly, the Kalishny-Rudinsky republics were able to become democratic powers. After the collapse of the Rudinsky Union, it is important that both Russia and Russia ended up with the named and Radian republics and Vladu over Yak. Authoritarian regimes are right. And after all, democracy did not give up there, it began to be suppressed. Here I am in Russia, let's say in Kyrgyzstan, in Azerbaijan, up to one absolute government still came. You publish in the republics of Kalishny, so you hand over. Still, everyone who was in the Radian Union strands to authoritarianism. And the botany of Tilka is that both exiles and ready-made people have their fingers pinched by their serf, and that Lita. To that Putin so Pakhanov Viktor Yanukovych for getting sprats of force against the maiden 2000 of the 13th 14th again. And for 3 times he will put Krabko on those wars. And it didn't work out. And then Putin went to the offensive stage of Poshiku Shliaka before the surrender. The next stage of freezing and the Ukrainian energy. I also rendered my buckets for Sprat straight. Both on the tribute of serious blows to the economy and on the tribute of serious blows to the civil population. In principle, this is absolutely unproductive work. It is unproductive from a historical point of view. It is basically illustrated by the rise of a friend of the light vein. The stakes of the power went with themselves in a deadly clinch. I also respected the bombardment of civil places as a real key for laying on the layer in the weapons of Ukraine, and using it until surrender. Not marked bombed to Britain and the Rudinsky Union. The Rudinsky Union, and in Great Britain, from receiving the United States, actually pretended to the ruins of German places. In one with their fallout, I did not succeed in achieving real results. Before the solo thought in all the Ukrainians, she showed that you don't make up your mind about surrender to everyone, but you make up your mind to the power row and the power army. All attacks on the civilian population, the laying out of the population of Tilka people, hatred, and readiness to support. No one really went into Ukraine for the rights of the occupying army on their territory, and carrying out special preventive visits in occupied places washed away the real cleansing of the politically active population of Zalyaku. This is a simple political truth, both in Be and in Be of an authoritarian regime, and in Be it is democratic. And in the wind, you can cut it out. The fact that Putin, looking from a visco-technical point of view, is absolute idiocy. So the guilt does not burn out. And you know that very well. And you can check by overbearing emotions and what you don't trust. Emotions of people for whom, and they have adoration, capitulate on Russian mines, drones and missiles fly to their apartments. And drones and rockets are flying to the CHP and it's light and warm in their apartments. Not with absolutely I still you know, I have already added from Russia, and demand to capitulate to Russia, believe me. Before such settings she just I'm in Ukrainian, so they at a time, does not mean that we are not overestimating from Ukraine. The fifth column of people, I overestimated for the frequency of the radiant thought, and the Russian world. Objective reality. The Ukrainian RSR was created in such a way that those people had to be cut off for Ukrainian statehood. All this is obviously logic. So in those situations, I don't give political logic in Putin's dia, and I would have clucked. Nama and Tesh are aware that the Ukrainian strikes on Russian places are not being washed in order for the retinue to disappear there. I am rich in what I obviously want, even just elementary human adoration. And so I'm afraid of Russia and the visco-technical potential. That's something in our market, not in Belgorod, but in the whiskey enterprises. So that they could not be less than a ruble and whiskey products. On airfields, so that the Russian one does not take off, and in there and on the ground base on corkscrew enterprises. So that the Russians have at least a penny more to replenish the military budget, and in the Zagoli so that the dragon does not attack you. The torture is not in that, and I will. He has light. The torture is that he doesn't have teeth. And Maya Beauty, the essence of our day, will see a message on the way to the Russian Federation. Then again, with a bite with the whole, and exchange Belgorod for smart Kiev, Poltava, she and Chekremchik. She will bring clear electoral points in clear elections, we can and that we will be dieting anyway. And I will continue. And it's not me, as I won't have elections, electoral points will still be hacked. And the church, of course, pure idiocy and washing. So I need a reading Osvedum. I'm glad to be in the process of thinking, and already at a time, on missiles for strategic facilities in the Russian Federation. And we are still on Putin's trumpet. During the conversation, a tomahawk and missiles are also displayed on ticks. And Putin today allowed at the summit in the CIS powers near Dushanbe to say another Trump to show off and another kind of conduct will be a demonstration of the new dumping of the Russian Federation into the Russian proto-wind defense system. Hacha-Webakim is still a greedy proto-wind defense system that cannot take on the self-defense enterprises of the Russian Federation. The kind of elementary drones, drony, and everyone is on Tilka. What we call a rocket. So in those situations, as we are perfectly fine with you, of course, it will be possible to talk about the development of the podium in the right straight line. We will also cut off all of this equipment and accurately figure out the hits. In me, in principle, and in Shadumka, even before what Putin is for. Putin is obsessed with the idea so far in his understanding of the state. I am such a horde Khan at echo right and wrong, and ready to punish people for what they are doing wrong. Kola gave them preferences, they are the right reason. I'll tell you a wonderful but of such preferences. Putin's arrival at the 2004th lesson, in the brightness of the full-time agitator, Viktor Yanukovych and Putin, is now marking a direct line on the Ukrainian current from Ukraine topics. The naked Hromadyany of Ukraine will be able to be overstated on the territory of the Russian Federation for 90 days, without a century-long registration of the estate to visit. At the moment when Putin is being punished, and not by the whoppers of Russia itself, and not by the whoppers of Belarus. In such a rank, the Allied power in Russia does not have such a prerogative. And Tilky are Ukrainians themselves. Another layout was extremely difficult, but Yak Lyudina, coming for Chelyabinsk and Maya against 3 days. And he comes from Melitopol and cannot go anywhere for 90 days, and not but Putin respects something with a rank, and the Ukrainians seem to be on the right side. When Ukrainians add that they are on the right side of the convict Yanukovych, with us in the 2004th kind, they managed not to be on this side. Putin starts carrots, then you start gas blackmail of Ukraine. Putin, of course, will still be freezing. These regions are Bilshi's choice, voted for Yanukovych, and a stronghold of pro-Russian forces. And he doesn't care at all. Because collectively, according to earlier Ukraine, it is jealous because absolutely all the everyday life in places, at once and the pub of Ukraine, were a stronghold of pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian forces. And at the places of entry and the center on the powers of the pro-Ukrainian forces. With joy for those who are ready to guide him and 2 politicians in the people until the 2014th lesson. 2000 of the 14th lesson of his sympathies before Putin came to sympathy before Vdulak, before Lukashenko. And all these people are faggot and drone and shelling of the Russian Federation. Their places pretend to be the ruins of Putin's adoration. The fact that collectively Ukrainians can be an idea. And the head idea, and while Kiev, there is still Moscow. The fact that in Russian political culture, and the head place on the injection, everything in the world will turn around. For Russians on an obscure, and not ostensibly St. Petersburg, Khabarovsk, Blagoveshchensk, Tula, and Yaroslavl. And Moscow again. And all that you visit the state, you leave for the Rada of Moscow and Muscovites. It is you from the regions that flows into these regions, let's say, by a donor, and from the federal budget cleverly drains. In that the land was erased and protested against the Moscow lord. I'll tell him with the old Yaroslav. The sides in that pretended to the ruins. There are also Yaroslavsy Namagala's post. That's it. The whole story. And he respects that in Ukraine on the side of Kiev and the Ukrainian state. Yak stability in Moscow and stability in the Chekist regime. That's why they have such emotions. For their brain-centered model of power. So the magnetization is destabilized from before the surrender. One motive is unproductive. While I am a slave forever, I can perform and Pratecha on Tilki in my Marias. And this will go to the defeat of the golden hoard of a friend. And the motive is that the whole Moscow power of Rome and the cards are a filthy parody of the hoard of gold. She's not gold. And I don't want to think like a yak. Well, that's for nothing. In vain that. The third idea is the gates and problems for Kiev and for it and in words. That was the problem. I'm at a time ticka, I'm not a mind yak drop out, and that's it. Well, here are real speeches, yaks we are waiting for at a time. I would say in our sky, all these bumps in the sky will be extremely guarded, and further. Yakon can be seen. Well, if necessary, it's really against the enemy from an ally. Today there was a Zustrikin and SIM cards we went to Ukraine. I'm just going to talk about what's from the Ukrainian energy sector. It is obvious that we will need help. If Russia gives the Russian and Russian forces in Ukraine a pious gas production capacity, then it is clear that Europe has gas for us. I'm not new pennies for the Ukrainian budget. So, our allies have an argument to think about how to ensure Ukraine's needs in gas and energy. And I'm absolutely the obvious point we have to mark. Even before the Allies, here you are decisive and obvious. The moment has come. It's so necessary. Speak up. It is necessary to think and yak frozen infrastructure facilities of Ukraine view away from Russian attacks. We understand perfectly. There was no obvious result. So Shvidka on Putin. This suggests that the system is against wind defense, and further, and to sleep. Again, we do not need the topic allegedly stuck in the political European Ukraine. After drones showed up in the windy expanse of Poland, and just sobs of European secrets in the wind. We need to think about the cutting policy, even before the fight against unmanned and propel control over the windy expanse. So that the Western system against windy defense languishes drones and missiles on windy expanse when hiring are frequent in Ukraine. I am, of course, still forged from a political point of view. The pithy is that resurrecting the idea of Ukraine of 3 varieties, 2 varieties, in the mind of rich people. as Russian propaganda has been engaged in 3 times. And buckets of conspiracy and people. What about what we will be able to establish a zone against windy defense? On frequent in the territory of Ukraine. There is also our proto-bolt on the windy defense, perhaps often porous unit, given to with food. And effectively for the territory of the right and beer Ukraine. What was absolutely right and needed there is still extremely not wasting all defensive defense systems on the entire territory. Region C and C know the most serious blows from the side of the thief. Obvious. So it is necessary to think about and maybe often to success. I think that here it is possible to turn around again to the topic of confiscation of Russian assets. If Russia continues to live on the Ukrainian infrastructure, then it will actually accept these pennies to pay for the energy carrier. To the fact that it pays for Russian and Ukrainian gas production and Ukrainian electrics with Russian pennies. The one who pays. It may be up to such an argument, but such thoughts, yaks are overgrown with absolutely such a Percy sketch, and we will turn on the faces of the attacks for a pity. I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel. I assure you, my friend, with you and the demo on the channel millions and so richly has already been completed. So I will be in diagnose skin, who signed the ethers, all puffed up skin I fate. The gates of the non-intellectual channel are millions, I will say so, without modesty. Take the part of the channel, put it in a podobake, comment, and I will invent, and the energy situation will continue to develop. And I'm guilty of sprat torture, already at the topic of the chat tasks for day. It seemed to you that Klyukov dopa on the Russian automotive and gas delivery of natural infrastructure. The People's Republic of China will also help Russia economically. But the International Republic of China is not just giving Russia yuan. And I won't work. Economical policy. People's Republic of China coup of Russia, naphtha products for car choppers. And that Russia in May has a power on the carpooling in, it is a sprat of raw naphtha. I'm on sale in Maya. On naphtha, I take off what is on and on such sprats, and is needed for China India. And he and can have given Kupovati Russian naphtha, and already pull less income. Well, and that Russia is stingy on car products, this man can cut down his own, and for fuck's sake, on car products. And can cut down for an imperious naft. So the prices are just duh. I'm tied up by purchasing energy resources. The less energy resources Russia has, it would still be possible to extract on the topic of Zagoli for the entire Russian economy. And all Russian guilt just came posa on mining enterprises. So I think that here and in the Chinese everything is fine to notify. It seemed to you that Putin was striking these blows. We can't bring these prices down yet. And I also have a Venzerace, and just impose it with your evil ones, as well as with a hidden ritual. But the rumor is you are so again, and this is the meaning of rituals in such politics in Putin and the Satanist. Coldly fine, of course, what she wants in politics. Putin sounds like a leader in a wasted empire. And from the point of view of having seen the political style of the opponents of the Federal Service of the Russian Federation, of the KGB of the USSR, I took his porch to the President of Russia. And they adore, so they can straighten and wash 1995, we can say 1995. And Putin speaks with the voice of the Russian people. I adore being seen in the imperial state. And this is absolutely logical adoration. There's also that the authorities in Ukraine have a slave, the colony has a boss. They need Ukraine, they need a Kolichnaya Republic to compensate for their Arab camp in Russia itself. So here we can also say the interests of the Russian lord and the Russian people. I am absolutely Todoshny. And it's not like it's not a ritual. Pak the Divas tools until the surrender of the rebellious province and nothing more. I saw it. Muscovites don't have them in their politics. And the propaganda said that the crocus is in us. I'm talking about the fact that instability in Moscow, I think, can beatings in the Kremlin with the key to the wound-up guilt, and the cob of rune processes. And I'm still showing you Tilky, that the blow to the Russian placed Tilky alignment in order for Ukraine to extort its ruler. From those who decide on, it is clear that the ABC truth. I'm Nicola. It is not instability that people adore for wars, Russians will not be blamed. And the instability of the lingual can be deduced for various reasons. Well, the fact that the strikes will produce the fact that the Russians will fang their Vlad joking to fight from the Ukrainians. That's how you don't doubt it. Here I am, an important stitch behind the public and Belgorod. Blackout in the greatest point of Zoe's wife was thinking about the fact that our Vlada promised us a Sioux zone in Ukraine. She did not reach us on the Ukrainian territory, but she did not kick us out. She said, "Can we have a war for Ukraine?" And it does not matter that the idea of the continuation of the guilt of the occupation of part of the territory of Ukraine, so that bombs could be used and everything is fine, was just the idea. It would be an abnormal reaction. Tell your mind why the Russians bring cold on us, then we froze from their look. Well, the fact that we have winter and the fact that the Russians are not yet their criminal ally, General Frost, mythologized with a statement. From Cola Frost, we help. The fact that everything can be you and Frost. And Frost, then we will lose. These Frosts, those French and those Germans, they will part by themselves in the cold, freeze in the cold. Well, they forget that Ukrainians do not pass the scourge to such minds, because Sasha is still in the climatic zone. Neither the French are on the Germans, then people are warm and water, and well, it's light. And the fact that it did not produce anything in 2020 to another, in 2023 hands. Now he's going hard, and sweeps for all the good. I haven't started anything for anyone in Moscow. There's also you decided that they just fucked it up, that is, your whole idea. Compared to Vlad, who is pleasant to us, he is not marked for your shade, and so soon I will be shoved behind all sorts of populace. And they will seem to be not visible in Russia, but I will tell you honestly. So, the alternative party for not at axe will arrest in the popularity of the average. And I respect the head gerolody and popularity, not with the acceptance of migrants, but the fear itself. Fear of wine from Russia. Fear and Putin, successfully trading deep in the Europeans. We all know this very well. Well, in those situations, those politicians that they are ready to be added with Putin. Go to the diplomatic reception at the Russian embassy for a holy day in Putin's homeland. Think about it. And you often take on the mayor's party. Well, the same exploiting Viktor Orban says about the prime minister to the mayor. According to the sanitary cordon, and between the alternatives and the political parties. It was not possible to submit a sanitary cordon under the ebb tide. Then that Nicola did not demonstrate her abilities to Moscow in such a way. For the second time, on richly close and up to the Kremlin ambush and party, the Socialist United Party rules in the communist hours. But it doesn't work out as an alternative. But again so. And the left, and the alternatives for not Nicola, did not go into what Java has. That cola without an alternative for not cannot be killed for the target of It is clear that the party of Nicola will not be the target of liberals and Libya, and not the Social Democrats, and not the Vilni Democrats, and not the party, but not in Libya. Osh. So, as a single partner of the party, and I know the alignment, I rule the coalition, and with a roar, and foresee. And we say, and the Christian Democratic Union Friedrichshammer. Well, and the Christian Social Union, and the private political activity of the party in Bavaria. And you, of course, are still in the coalition, then you cannot pursue a foreign policy. I am the collapse of the coalition. So at the time I took out the situation in the alternative in May, the SIB may not be added with Putin, I'm not Bachu yet. It will still be rich, and as a result, I will develop in the situation with, and in Europe. Really. And I will not be such a serious threat to Maybutny. Rank firm Ponica and Trump for our Bilshi to Pomoga and the creature success at a close outcome. Well, it's not a feeling of supposedly such success. We are bashing Tilka with the latest stage of Trump's plan, and we will still be enlisted by the terrorist group Hamas. And will be a really important stage of guilt. For the same reason, there are pripy in the fire in that's at the close outcome of that's and the success of President Trump. And we do not know yet there will be a distance. That's another decision about the scattering of the terrorist organization Hamas and about the fact that it is in the hall. From the political Gaza. After all, the word is a call to everyone. And this is an absolutely obvious fact, and it needs to be said. So it doesn't happen in those situations. Yak, we are with you perfectly, of course. We can see the conflict again. Trump disno at once namaga, for up to the zakonchenaya guilt of Russia against Ukraine, that very naga mechanism is being bolted. To end the guilt at the end. And what does this mean for the mechanism to cope? I'm still talking seriously. The lawsuit on the Yuba side. Trump, having given Israel, will continue, and the operation in Gaza is often important for Hamas facilities in place. In the Gaza high-rises. Some of you were arrested as a terrorist and a springboard for attacking the Jewish state. And it was absolutely obvious that the operation in Gaza would be carried out further away, and the militants in Hamas were recruited to the shop of the gangster organization of the Owls 2023 lesson. The Israel Defense Forces were dismantled against the Hamas fighters. So let's continue. And from the point of view of Hamas, it just started to get numb, and when hiring, about a pause. To be seen in its forces for the future of the Jewish state. And in the hour of Trump, you're back on Israel. The temple ideas are suitable for Hamas. It is obvious that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and the ultra-right ministers in his squad are greedy. And the continuation of the apparatus is already up to full terrorist organizations and militants. What could continue is that the militants from Gaza are very often positively put up to Hamas and are ready to fight in llamas before the Jewish powers. The process is virtually skinless. I would say a man on the territory of the Gaza Strip and in honest sprats. Loot on the Western Bur. Urdan River recruits Hamas potential. So Bulo Buddha is away. And Trump, who absolutely logically speaks of Israel, will still continue and have filed an apparatus for the forgiveness of evil. I will try and evil and so call the civilized world. Sprats, yak to spare the participants of the Holocaust in Europe. And the Arab retinue has already gone to Europe from Ukraine from the Proporama. It is still unclear about the Palestinian power and the Petrograd terrorist organization. He will show the anti-Semitism of Adolf Hitler, again becoming an axis for the fineness of Europeans and self-serving idiots, including Jewish people. So I forget about Ukrainians, their peoples, their power among the Jews, absolutely a dozen fights against the entire history of the people. Well, and this is what it produced for the rights of a plentiful tisk before the result. And this Pervin can try this tool for Russia and Ukraine, but not with Putin anymore. And you can hire him as a nobleman, sell him as a nobleman. The fact that the Shlyak, and that sanctions, and to beat, that Putin is ready for prip in the fire on their minds, is not really prip in the fire. On the prip in the fire on their minds, they are bent on the Ukrainian curve, so that it is over and the recipe. That is, with this recipe, I just need the opposite. We are also talking about Maybit. So, I think Putin is also preparing for such a recipe. Discussing the situation, tied up with Maybutny ideas, and the yak option, is bucking on Tilky. That we have a view of his primus of Ukraine before the surrender, and Kevin himself may not believe it. He does not need Trump on fire in order to take with the forces for a new strike on Ukraine with the most tired hands. Not the fault, I think. Yak is on a brilliant outcome, and so it is here. Well, and then the Divan can extremely afford to have such a powerful tool for Ukraine. That the Ukrainian is jealous of Trump's Shvidsk, so that it comes to light with stake hammers. Trump and Putin and Kola Putin, you decide that it has already matured to the end of guilt. Another reason for the intensification of Russian attacks against Ukrainian energy and Ukrainian infrastructure. What else were you in today's live broadcast in Diachny? To those who you all channels unsubscribed to it in that broadcast, put in a podobake. Comment on the broadcast. I want to find more infection of rich people, but it is possible and light, it is visible even more people choked. There will be mats of access for materials, so help the algorithm. Well, it is known that cooking fate in tools and helps to continue working in the project in the Diachnia skin. Then it helps the topic of the channel again and again, as if the channel is the same millionaire. And I implore you to help the Ukrainian army with your brother and the fate of the provoked fees, including those fees. I often recommend on Imperious Old Men at Social Merezha on Can and subscribe to these recommendations. In the meantime, we will say goodbye to the god of Ukrainians Heim. You know, there is no forecast from under the sofa, there will be quiet, quiet days. And we are still ashamed to you.